What time is it where you're at?
9 a.m.
That's not so bad.
Only an hour difference, but yeah, had to type it in.
Hour. Yeah.
Eastern to Central. Who knows that conversion out there? Help me.
Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. David Perrodin, and welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast. With us today, Aaron Reynolds of Effin Birds. Thank you so much, Aaron, for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So humor, I prepared a statement because I want to give people kind of the context of what humor is and kind of the challenges to humor right now in society. So humor is observed in all cultures, all ages. Historically, psychologists framed it as negative, that you are being vulgar, you're exhibiting superiority. Freud said it's a defense mechanism. But modern research shows that we need humor activities. People appreciate humor. They have greater sense of well-being. And people who don't use humor tend to be more depressed. Clinical psychologists are using humor to increase subjective well-being, or if people perceive that they feel better. It's an essential part of personal safety. So how does that tie into the safety doc? We plow through life. We don't tune into what's happening around us. If we're tuning into what is happening around us, we're tuning into the nuances of life, and we're tuning into the humor. It just makes us so much safer, so much more aware of our environment. Every time we laugh, we kind of decompress a little bit. We bring out that stress and manifest it in a laugh. We're better for it. We're safer. So humor is an essential part of safety. If we become too literal, too linear, we miss out on humor. We're not as safe. It's difficult, though, to do that in a world that seems to punish us for laughing. So, Aaron, tell us about yourself. Aaron Reynolds, ladies and gentlemen.
What's really funny about that whole introduction is that my pathway to doing this was kind of a self-help. I got really sick a few years ago, and I couldn't work. My work all involved talking, and I couldn't speak.
Wow.
And so for a guy who spent literally 8 hours a day talking, presenting, and not being able to speak at all was a nightmare. And I got into this sort of depressive cycle of watching the wrong kind of movies on Netflix. I watched Blue Ruin, which is a great movie, and I watched Only Lovers Left Alive, which is a great movie. And all of a sudden, all of my Netflix recommendations were, here are films where people are depressed and then they die.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, I gotta not do this anymore. And I, through a series of choices, essentially, I started making things on the internet. And I mean, I had done small things before, but I started putting the work into them and, putting the effort behind them and putting the consistency there to them. And I ended up with a series of, viral things that I kept taking all the lessons from the last one and then building a new one that did the good parts and left out the bad parts. And then it would be here, and then I would do it again. And eventually we got to Effin Birds, which is, now my day job, which is terrifying. My day job is making jokes on the internet, which is it's the dream, but also how did I get here? Right. I have to think back to I had to have a crisis to get here,
So Aaron, was it Swear Trek, right? The memes of Star Trek. Was that more or less the starting point when you were making the transition from your work and career into, okay, I'm going to explore, I understand humor. I'm going to explore this more. Hey, it's starting to go viral. Was that where it started?
That was the second or third thing, and it actually went through a bunch of iterations before it got somewhere. Like I had to figure it out. Swear Trek, I love Swear Trek. Swear Trek is a project with zero commercial prospects because it plays in the playground of somebody else's intellectual property.
Right.
And so Effin Birds was essentially the exercise of, can I do the same thing that I did over here on Swear Trek, but with content that does not belong to CBS or Paramount Pictures, and get the same kind of results or similar results. And what I was surprised to find was when I removed the specificity of Star Trek from it, it was more popular. I thought that was the thing that I was like, I'm hitching my wagon to a thing that's already popular.
Okay.
And that's how I'm going to get here. But it turns out that the part that I was doing right was more important to the project than the part that belonged to somebody else. And that made me feel really good.
So Effin Birds, tell us about it. When did it start? When did that idea come up?
Yeah, it's almost 3 years old. I think it's going to have its third birthday soon, next couple of months, something like that. It was originally, I had done a bunch of good stuff, and Swear Trek was like really hitting its stride, and I got invited to pitch a media organization that was struggling with some of their social media content. They asked me for some pitches. They essentially what they wanted, and I knew this from all of our conversations, what they wanted Swear Trek, but for content that they owned.
Okay.
So I was like, that's great. Like we can, and you know what, the part that kills me is that project fell apart over internal licensing stuff, because they got concerned about, for instance, paying actors royalties on a GIF from a show from 20 years ago and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so, like, that's a reason for this to fall apart. It's sad that that's the reason that fell apart, but I understand it. But I had pitched them a whole bunch of other stuff because it was an opportunity to pitch a big media organization that I really I respect and like, and so I pitched them the proto Effin Birds. I pitched them what would become Effin Birds, but a little tweaked to be more brand relevant to them, and they hated it. They hated. Like, they first didn't talk for about 20 seconds after I presented the idea, and then they were just like, "No, this is bad." And I was kind of crushed because I was like, I love this. This is going to be really good.
Right.
And the next day I was like, but here's the thing: these guys are struggling with their social media offerings, and they're asking me because they need my help. I think it's a good idea. Why don't I just do it myself? And so I went online and I looked, and I found a $20 stock art package of birds. And I don't know if you've seen the Effin Birds owl. He shows up a lot, and he's got his eyes really squinty.
I have.
He's in the book. Let me just find him here. This is a video I can show him. There he is. That's the Effin Birds owl. Anyways,
Yep.
So he was on the front cover of the package, and I was like, oh, this is what how much is this to license? $20? Great, done. $20. And so that was the basis of Effin Birds, was like the 16 birds that were in that package. And it within a week was more popular than their brand. And I felt really good about that, and then I tried to build it, and what was really funny is I ended up thinking that I had done it wrong, or miscalculated in some way, because I made it popular, and I made it more popular than Swear Trek very quickly. But I couldn't make money at it, which was built into its DNA. Like, that was one of the, when we talk about pain points of previous projects, one of the pain points of a project that takes up a ton of time is that if it doesn't have an income, it's a hard project to continue doing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, you can do a project for love, or you can do a project for the way that it drives other things in your career, or the way that it drives exposure or something like that. But if it's not doing, at the time I had a job for a big technology company. And so Effin Birds did nothing for my job. It did quite the opposite. And so it was one of those things where I thought I had a business model in my head, and when I executed it, it was a huge failure. And I mean, it wasn't a failure. It did okay, but it did not come close to meeting my expectations. On a previous project we had done, do you know Cotton Bureau? Have you ever seen Cotton Bureau? It's a great website.
Okay.
They do,
no, I haven't.
They do, I mean, it's reductive to say it's like Kickstarter for shirts, but it's like Kickstarter for shirts. Okay. They do classic old school screen printing. And the difference between screen printing and like the on-demand printing you get from all these places is screen printing is great, high-quality, old-fashioned T-shirt printing.
Yes.
But you have to do larger runs, and you have to do them all at once. And so what they do is they run like a 2-week campaign, and however many shirts you sell in that 2 weeks, that's how many they run.
Okay.
Right. It's great. And it has a built-in timer. So, in terms of like marketing things on the internet, it's great. You only have 2 weeks to buy it. So, so and so the thing was I had done for previous projects, I had sold like literally 10,000 shirts for another project. And I was like, okay, Effin Birds, here comes the first shirt for Effin Birds. Let's see how we're going to do. I sold 30 shirts. And I was like, oh, I've done this wrong. I've miscalculated. And it killed me to have only sold 30 shirts. And I kept doing the project because I believed in it. But it was going to come to an end if I couldn't find a way to move beyond that, 30 shirts.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And what it turned out, the thing was, it was my thinking that was the wrong way around on it. I was expecting that there was one universal thing that everybody would want to buy. And the thing with Effin Birds is there are 3 jokes every day, and every joke hits the right spot for somebody. But there's no joke that hits the right spot for everybody, right? And my friend Nick, he badgered me for, I'm going to say literally 3 months. He was on me that I needed to do on-demand merchandise and a bunch of different designs at the same time. None of this doing one design and trying to sell it. And I finally relented. And I didn't have a lot of hope going into it, but we could do it for almost no money. So it was nothing. There was nothing to lose. Right. There was just some time. And so we did it, and it was hugely successful. And now it is my primary income.
Thank you for tuning in to the Safety Doc Podcast with the nation's leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin, author, radio show host, university instructor, researcher, expert witness, and consultant. Powerful testimonials. Dr. Perrodin has a strong reputation as the go-to safety consultant, and he was still able to exceed our expectations. When we went looking for an expert in the field of crisis preparedness and prevention, David was the single person we pursued. Not easy stepping into the touchier subjects of life, but Dr. David pulls it off. Take a listen. Now, back to Dr. David Perrodin and the Safety Doc Podcast.
So I read that Effin Birds merchandise on one day did something like $11,000.
That was launch day. Yeah, that was launch day for the on-demand thing. So I went from when we look at like 30 shirts at $30, $900 is not nothing. Right. But you take that and then you do 11,000, and that was 2 weeks to get to that 900, and then 11,000 in one day. And part of that is there was pent up demand, but part of it was because I launched with 15 different shirts available, right? And so the thing is, if you only sell 30, it's okay if you only sell 30 if you've got 10 of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. So Aaron, this so your merchandising, is any of this at your house or property, or is this all through a company that distributes this for you?
The majority of it is print on demand through a company called Printful, who've been a great partner through all of this. We do the majority of it through a company called Printful. They've been a fantastic partner, and they're great because they have a really wide variety of merchandise. I wanted to do shirts, but they also did mugs, and of course I did mugs, and it turns out I've sold a lot more mugs than shirts. Then they also do flip-flops. And so every once in a while, it's like, oh, let's put something on a flip-flop and see if people want to buy that. And of course, They do, because it's funny, and and if I can make a joke about flip-flops while on flip-flops, then I've done a great job. But we also started we used the money that was generated from that first big blast to do some products that we had to do through traditional channels. Pins, you can't do a pin on demand. You have to do 2,000 pins, to get a good price on pins. And so I did runs of pins, and I did runs of decks of cards.
Yes.
I've always wanted to have decks of cards, and it turns out deck of cards is the best giveaway item I have if I'm trying to generate buzz. When I go to events, I take decks of cards with me. Because the thing about a deck of cards is it's not something that is it's not just this person who understands the deck of cards. Because when you give somebody a deck of cards, they play with their friends, right? And so they infect the group around them with the love of Effin birds. And so I did it hoping that would be the case the first time, and it was so powerful that I just did it over and over and over again. So, that's been pretty good. Decks of cards, pins. Do we have anything else? Some stickers. I started doing stickers. Now I do stickers on demand because we found a good sticker on demand option. Because stickers were a little challenging because we never had the exact stickers people wanted. Because I was like, well, I can put 3 into production. I'm going to pick the top 3, and they did well. I'm not complaining that they didn't do well, but they didn't do as well as we would have hoped. So so stickers on demand is great. That stuff, thankfully, was never in my own basement. Well, I mean, some was in my basement for a couple of days, but as soon as we started doing not on-demand merchandise, I was like, you know what I need? I need a shipping guy.
Absolutely.
So actually, right from the start, I had immediately hired one person, Nick, who convinced me to build the store, manages the store. Manages the back end. He does the web stuff because it's not my forte. And plus I want to spend the time writing the jokes, not the time, doing the back end stuff. And so when shipping came, I was like, great, I need a shipping guy. And so Ryan is my shipping guy. Grant was my first shipping guy. Love you, Grant. Grant decided that he didn't want to have so many pins in his house.
Yes.
It was, understandable. But Ryan's got a nice big basement, and so far Ryan's wife has not objected to like the quarter ton of paper products that arrived at his door.
Oh my God.
The greeting cards. There was a big shipment of greeting cards showed up at his place because it's almost Christmas. And I have a customer service guy as well because I learned really early on there are a lot of emails to answer, and if I answer too many of them, I will start to get grumbly or mean or, the thing where something happens to you over and over again and none of the other people involved know that it's happening to you over and over again. You're the only one who knows, but you're still like you're mad at the 7th person,
Right, yes.
It's not their fault. And I was like, I don't want to be that guy. I need somebody who can not be that guy, somebody who can just let it roll off of them, who has the right set of skills for working with that. And so I hired Joe to do customer service.
Wow.
That's Team Effin birds.
You're working with your editor, you're working your publisher.
Yeah.
When I wrote my book, I had some friction with my editor, friction with my publisher. One of the things was, how many words, and I know now we're talking pictures, but everything is measured in words, and people don't understand that unless you write a book, that it's you don't know pages. You can't just say, here, I've written something, it's 200 pages, so it will be 200 pages in a book. Right. So did you have any friction points with your editor or publisher, and how did you work through those?
For the most part, I went into it with the thought process of, I have never written a book before. And I was blessed to have great editors in the UK and in the US. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to take all the advice and I'm only going to choose 1 or 2, battles to fight, and the one battle that I did fight a little bit was about punctuation because I am, I'm very deliberate with my punctuation and I use it as if you are reading a script and in your head, this is how the voice goes.
Yes.
So I frequently use no period at the end of the sentence to denote a sentence that doesn't sound like it ended with finality.
Okay.
What were we talking about? You know what I mean? Like that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I got an email from my editor that said, "Look, we're going to have to talk about your dislike of punctuation, particularly question marks.
Yes.
Particularly question marks, because I would have a bunch of questions in the captions for Effin Birds that didn't have question marks at the end because I, in my head, did not hear them as a question.
Yes.
And so what I said to myself was, I'm going to fight for 2 of these and let the rest of them go. And so I picked 2 where I really cared about, and I made my case, and it was great. We met in the middle. I got my 2 with no question marks, and all the other ones have question marks. I think they're probably better with the question marks. You know, it's and then actually, I think one of the most interesting conversations I had going into the American version of the book was because it was picked up in the UK first, and so the UK version is the first version. Even though technically its street date is 2 days later, it was submitted and edited in the UK, and then that version came over to the United States to be to become the American version. The most interesting conversation I had was about dust jackets, and so the American edition doesn't have a dust jacket. And what I heard from 10-Speed in the U.S. is that the majority of their Amazon returns and 1-star Amazon reviews are about damage to dust jackets.
Okay.
Right? And so they were like, so, if it's okay with you, we're not going to do a dust jacket on this. And I was like, you're the expert, and that sounds like good lived experience that I absolutely want to, I want to take into account here. And so the American version does not have a dust jacket. And what was interesting is because the book was originally born as a crowdfunded project before it got picked up by publishers, the crowdfunded version shipped about a month ago, and that is what I see a lot of. And thanks Joe for getting these emails. But there's a dent in the corner of the dust jacket, or there was a little tear in the corner of the dust jacket. It's like, that's a thing that happens. Wow. And so it's really, I found that fascinating. I mean, it's been a great choice, I think, for the American version of it.
I also was informed there would be no dust jacket, just hardcover when I did a book, and I never questioned it. I didn't get deeper into that. But I'm glad things went well. I mean, things went well with my publisher too. It was also my first book, and mine strictly was kind of on this word count every time they would go through, and I'd submit it, and then they would kind of rough proof it and say, well, now go up, 10,000 words. Now go down 15,000 words. But when it was done, I had some content that was still usable that I spun off into some journal articles. All was well.
So I just speaking of that, there was one other thing that because this book, the one difference between how I do Effin Birds on the internet and how I do Effin Birds in the book is that the book is more like a bird spotter guide in terms of it has these sections that are there we go. Now you can see
which I love
sections of habitat and so on. And so the thing was about breaking format. I had a format that I built that was identifying characteristics, habitat, a line of description, a few other bits. And I got a lot of feedback about how often I broke that format. And because I'm a guy who likes to set an expectation and then break the expectation for humor. Like that is a key to it's a key to how all of this works. But so I would build the habitat identifying characteristics, and then I would have one that just is like a single aggressive, hyper aggressive line, and nothing else. And the thing is, I did it so often that it was destroying the joke. And so I ended up rewriting about, let me see, I'm going to say at least 20 of them to more closely conform to the standard that I myself had built. And just so that I think there's now only 3 that break the format in the book, and each of them has considerably more impact, than if there were 23.
Aaron,
Yeah.
how do you start Effin Birds and balance out a career and family, and then also, you know, this opens a lot of doors, but then it probably closes some doors because it's a, Effin
Yeah.
Birds and so tell me how you make that jump, how you do that, how
There
you
was,
balance
there
that
was,
and take the risk.
there was a lot of thought involved in it because I had a comfortable, well-paying job that I was good at, that I enjoyed doing. And one of the real tension points in my life was I had a 40-hour job, 40 hours a week, and I did probably another 35 hours of internet, Effin' Birds and Swear Trek and a couple other projects. And I have a lot of other projects, and what happens is a bunch of them will go on hiatus, and they may come back because I love them, or they may never come back because of time. One of my favorites was called Pet Upgrades, and people would send me pictures of their pets, and I would draw new eyes and mouths and sometimes props onto the animals so that they, had a new my favorite was this cat that looked really grumpy, and I gave him a cigar and these two really curled in eyebrows, and suddenly he looks like the editor of the newspaper, and everybody kept tweeting, "Get me pictures of Spider-Man" in response to this picture of the cat, and because he looked like J. Jonah Jameson. And so I love that project, but it took a ton of time, and it had this many commercial prospects, so it has been a casualty of a time crunch. I hope one day that I get back to that one. So there was this increasing stress of how do I continue to do my job and do all of these other things that are also another job. And then came a crisis point. I got, we were in the middle of the book crowdfund, and it was going to be a nice long crowdfund with a nice leisurely deadline for me to deliver the book so that I could do it while doing all these other things. And the lovely people at 10 Speed Press in the States came in and they said, "Hey, we want to buy this book. We want to buy it for the American market. Here is the deadline we would like you to hit because we want it out for Christmas 2019. And I was like, "Whoa, that's so soon."
Yeah.
And so I went to work and I said, "Guys, is there any opportunity for me to take a couple months off or move to part-time for about 3 months? Because I have a deadline in 3 months that I need to hit that I'm not going to be able to hit doing all the things that I'm doing right now." And I was really surprised because I worked there for 11 years, but I was really surprised that what I got back was an immediate, "You are going to have to decide which of these things is more important to you." And that was on a Wednesday, and I had quit. I quit on the Saturday. And so, I thought about it. I thought about it for about a day, and I realized that the opportunity to have a book in bookstores, which is, a lifelong dream of mine,
Yes.
was more important than, I think the thing was I had to take into account that in that job, I was at the peak of where I would get. I wasn't going to move up further. I was at the very top of my pay grade. I wasn't gonna get any raises beyond cost of living increases. It was time to go. And I think the thing is, I don't think it was anybody being mean-spirited or anything like that at my old workplace. Honestly, they also knew that this was a move that I needed to make.
Okay.
But that was hard. It's hard to say, farewell health insurance. I'm in Canada, so it's not quite the same, but it's nice to have somebody paying for your glasses and, your dentistry. And so, and I have 3 kids and a mortgage. The first thing we started looking at that very first day of me deciding whether or not I was going to keep working there was, where do we move to where our mortgage won't be as big? Because I was working in Ottawa. Ottawa is the capital city. It was a town full of diplomats, and it's priced like a town full of diplomats, And so I was like, well, first thing we're going to do is sell our Ottawa house and go somewhere hopefully cheaper. And we ended up in Toronto, which is not really cheaper, but we're making it work. It's all working. But it was hard. It was hard to take those steps, and it was stressful. It got easier because in that same time period, I got offered a gig that was a 3-day-a-week gig,
Okay.
which was exactly what I needed. I needed to not work 7 to 8 days a week. I needed to have at least a couple days a week to write. And so when I got offered a 3-day-a-week gig, it was perfect. And it was also nice that it was a gig where I was getting it because of things like Effin Birds and my online projects, and I'm not having to hide them on my resume. Do you know what I mean? Like that's,
absolutely.
I came to that realization that if somebody's going to want to hire me to do stuff for them, they're hiring me because of these things, not because of some other things, and I'm hiding this. When I got to my new workplace, the first day I was there were already Effin Birds mugs in the cupboard. I was like, yeah, this is my place. These are my people. I'm good.
Wow. And that's an incredible story because, I've known people who have gone, both ways when they hit the fork in the road. They stick with what's familiar, what's comfortable, and basically just sacrifice and say, I'm not going to follow my dream. And others who say, I'm going to follow the dream.
I was 43 making that decision, and part of that thought process was, well, I mean, if I'm not going to do it now, when am I ever I'm going to wait till I retire? Like I have this opportunity right now. If I don't take this opportunity right now, there is no one has given me this opportunity so far. This is the first time, might be the only time. If I'm going to do it, I got to do it.
And Aaron, would you say too, in this society we live, when you want to make this, most people around you it catches them off guard and they're not used to it, and they're like, whoa, like, I'm thinking back, the industrial age, like a Henry Ford, he's making cars and things are, 100 of them don't turn out, or Edison light bulb, but people aren't saying like, that was crazy. It was like my favorite bird coming up here. Like, you should have known better and things like that. So to do this, you have to kind of really break out of the gravity. It's like launching to the moon. You got to get past everything. And then, and then you're there, and you've made it. I mean, you are there. So what inspires you to write these absolutely brilliant, witty, keen comments? Where does that come from? It's amazing. Like, where does this come from?
Mostly it comes from my day-to-day life.
Okay.
Especially when I was at my old job, I interacted with a lot of human beings, and one of the important keys to my being successful in my old job was to maintain a calm, collected, Zen-like, demeanor at all times. And so I had a little notebook, and I would write things down. It eventually became the Notes app on my phone. And when I was writing things down in my Notes app, I looked at it one day and I was like, if anybody looked at this without knowing that I have a project called Effin Birds, they would think that I am like one situation away from exploding.
Right.
And so, I have a very angry note that's marked Effin Birds in my phone. I just sort of like, I take any negative experience I have and I turn it into fuel for this. Because if I let it be a negative experience that is just a negative experience, I didn't get anything out of it. And I would rather get something out of it. And so I make something out of it. Anything bad, when I feel a negative emotion, it turns into fuel for these projects. There's no so that I don't have to feel bad about having negative emotions, because I mean, we have them, and I can feel productive when I have a negative emotion instead of like fighting to keep it, down here. And so it's like, great, embrace it, put it in the note. It's fuel. Let's move on with everything else because I know that's there for me later.
So right there, I mean, and that's the personal safety. That is, that's the stress.
It's my well-being in my brain.
I had some of those types of experiences. And, I never wrote it down. So that was a thing too, because, people think we're going to remember it, or, you're out biking and it's this really funny, something comes to you and it's like it. But I think that's a point for anybody listening. Capture it if you want to, if you want to build up whatever you want to do with it. If it, your own, if it's just journal, but sometimes we just lose these funny things.
Can I tell you something really important that came from my old workplace?
Yeah.
I one time early in my career, I did an exercise to understand what made me lose composure. And it was a truly life-altering exercise. Every time you either lose composure or you feel like you are on the verge of losing composure, you write down what happened without evaluating it. And you do that for a month, maybe 2 months. And then you look at it and you evaluate it in a package because it tells you what your pain points are. It tells you what people can do to knock you off your equilibrium. Right. It tells you what will get you, what gets your goat. And once you know what gets your goat, you're immune, you know? So having understood the way that people could needle me, I could now no longer be needled in those ways. And it was like a superpower opening up. And so I strongly, strongly recommend that exercise. I did it. It changed everything about how I talk and interact. And now I recommend it for other people, you know, all the time because it's fantastic.
So Aaron, to build upon that, something that I learned early in my career was find a good member check, meaning somebody you can go to and say, am I reading this wrong?
Yeah.
Am I perceiving? Yeah. I mean, be honest with me. And someone who might be completely, you know, brutal in how honest they are and say, yeah, you are, like you're, or no, this person is right. Like you've not been.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of those people, and they've really helped me. And it's respect. I mean, it is complete respect. I remember, I was working on a project once and I ran it past, again, a member check. And I thought it was good. I thought people were just not open. I was taking some limelight from them or whatever. And he's like, no, take this thing and just like rip it apart, put it on your dining room table, put it apart, put it back together. And this is too much and too much, it's too wordy. It's this and no one's going to, and I was like, damn it. I'm like, come on, man. And then, I'm in denial for an hour, but then I'm like, okay, I trust him. I know this
person is a person I trust on purpose. Yeah.
And then I just pull back and I'm like, he's right. He's right. Yeah. If I was looking at this, it's too much this, too much this. I've got this down. I don't need to replicate it. And it was better, but.
A must-read for parents, teachers, and taxpayers. Dr. David Perrodin has written the most honest book about the $3 billion school safety industrial complex. Attorney James Sibley proclaims, a brave demonstration of speaking truth to power. School of Errors rips the lid off the billion-dollar school safety industry. Using real-world examples of successful responses in desperate situations, David contrasts the expensive window dressings pitched to panic parents with the inexpensive and effective approaches proven to actually work. Read this book before you let your school waste another precious dollar on meaningless safety theater. Buy the international bestseller School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America, now at Barnes & Noble or Amazon.
So you don't have to identify, but do you have a member check or two that you bounce things off of, or in this process when it kind of gets frustrating?
I do. I actually have, for Swear Trek, one of my favorite things I did was I built what we call the Swear Trek Writers Room. It's a Slack channel. It's a Slack channel where things go, and we debate whether or not they're good, whether or not they go too far. Always conscious of punching down and things like that.
Right.
Whether they hit the wrong note, and really whether or not they're funny. And so it has been great to have a team of, because I mean, Swear Trek doesn't make any money, so we're all unpaid in this endeavor. And so it's a rotating group of people that I trust, and they'll spend some time and then bow out for a while and then come back. But I should name check everybody. Mike and Chrissy and Noel and Joe. I'm going to have forgotten somebody. Nick. I'm gonna keep forgetting people, and then I'm going to feel really bad about it. But I mean, that has been really vital to me, and that's vital in this kind of writing. My editors have been very helpful in terms of that in book writing. And at my old workplace, I think the greatest thing was that there was a strong culture of feedback and a strong culture of accepting feedback.
Okay.
And so because it's hard to give feedback and it's hard to accept it. And so because as a company we worked so hard on delivering and accepting feedback, we all knew that we had each other's best interests at heart. And so we could go in and be critical of each other and make things better because we all understood we were there to make each other better. But I mean, that's hard. That's very hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard to maintain.
It is. Yeah. Even now, I still, my first reaction is to put up the force field, right.
Yeah.
And then, let the brain kick in and process through it and say, yeah,
well, listen to me with Effin Birds. I was like, no, I know this is a good idea. Screw you guys. Like that's not the way to take feedback. But part of feedback is filtering it and understanding the parts of it. And so my reaction wasn't a straight up screw you guys, even though I like to tell the story that way. My reaction was, let's disassemble this and find out what is wrong with this for them. From their perspective, what do they see as being wrong? And it was great because I could understand it, and I could also understand it like culturally from the organization being very like cautious is probably the most generous
right.
way to put it. Although I mean, do you come to me for something cautious?
Right. They
come to me for something bold.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my favorite bird, Aaron, is the forethought heron.
Heron, yes.
Because, of course you didn't plan for this effing catastrophe, right? As someone who works in school safety, the bird reminds me of the I told you so experts as in the description, show up in the post-mortem.
They're never there at the start.
They're never there.
Yep.
They're afterwards. Yep. And if you only would have had the contingency, there's no such thing as force majeure. We can account for everything. You should have known this, right? And so I'm going through. So when I hit the forethought, heron, I'm thinking that's Kevin. Like that to a T is Kevin. And I found that as I'm going through more and more of the birds, they're just linking out, this is this person, this is just this person, this is this person. And it gives me a smile then because every time I see it, I'm like, it's you, but it's a way for me to kind of chuckle and take this in without, pointing. But do you also, did you have that experience as you're putting this together, or do people come to you and say that is, and I guess I've kind of read this in, social media comments because people say like, this was completely Janice at the 3-hour meeting this morning. This is her.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that the number one goal of Effin Birds is to spark recognition. And I actually spend a lot of time and effort taking the situation that happened to me or the thing that bothered me and diluting it and taking away specificity until it can apply to more and more and more people. And what was funny is writing the book, in the descriptions, I ended up putting specificity back into it to the degree that there is an accounting of my 2017 annual review in the book. Sorry, Jody, you're in the book. So they're not going to like that one. Okay, so anyways, there's this thing where if you give people reasons to object, they'll object, right? And so one of my thought processes with these jokes is take away all the things that somebody can use to say, this is not what happened to me, right? I was thinking about it in terms of getting, cut off in traffic. If I complain about the red car that cut me off as I was trying to get onto the highway, right? Somebody who wasn't getting onto the highway, who wasn't cut off by a red car, they're out.
Yes.
But if I complain about getting cut off, if I don't mention a car, the person who got cut off by a bike, the person who had somebody push in front of them in a line in the supermarket, they have had the same experience, right? So I just have to keep pulling out parts until it still makes sense, I think the hardest part is make it vague while making sense and being the most relatable. Because I really need people to sort of say, oh yeah, that's me. I feel that, and that's like that's the core of this project. That was the core of Swear Trek was, oh yeah, I feel that. My favorite reply, when I get this reply on social media, when somebody just replies, it me, that means I did it right, because it me that's the response I'm looking for. So, it's always written with that in mind.
So, give me your favorites, your 3 favorites.
You asked that in an email, so I actually went and put bookmarks in the book so I could find them. It's hard. It's like picking your own children.
Absolutely.
But there's one here. Am I cursing on this show or not cursing on this show?
You can curse.
Okay. It's just because it's in the caption. I don't swear a lot in my daily life, which is very weird. But there's this little guy here. He says, I'm just going to get into bed and eat a whole fucking pie. This guy right here. Yep. And I'm going to read you the caption. The capitulation finch. When the world is too much to handle, the capitulation finch has a nap. Habitat. In bed, on the couch, lying on the floor between the bed and the couch. Identifying characteristics, sweatpants. I have strongly felt the urge to be that bird. Why do I have to work today? Can I just go play video games for a while? Can I? Right. I want to watch this show. I want to watch the new Dark Crystal show, right? When am I going to get 10 hours to watch Dark Crystal?
Yeah,
well, maybe I could do it today instead of doing work. I want to be that bird. So here's another one. Fallacies Blackbird. He says, leave this to the fucking professionals. Whenever conversations requiring expertise and nuance occur, Fallacies Blackbird is there to muddy the waters. Habitat. Academia. Panel shows. Letters to the editor. Identifying characteristics. Hubris. Misplaced confidence, and an embarrassing history of deleted tweets. That is about a very specific individual, but I think that's a pretty general.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I love the appraising bluebird. Here, one of the beautiful color plates in the book. It says, keep it in your pants. If you don't want the appraising bluebird's opinion on something, you should not show that something to the appraising bluebird. Habitat. For some incomprehensible reason, people constantly seek out the appraising bluebird. It doesn't hide, but it sure as hell doesn't have a neon sign by its nest that says, I want to hear your hot takes. Identifying characteristics. While its victims wish it were not the case, the appraising bluebird feels no obligation to be kind when replying to an unsolicited opinion.
Yes.
There we go.
So right there, though, that's most people going to social media and posting a photo and then just checking back 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. How many likes, how many comments, right?
Yep.
And so, and I shared I shared a funny story. I think it was funny, before we start talking. So, I got a brown sport coat, and I shown it to my mom because I they stopped down. And I say, I got a sport coat and stuff like that. And she says, that's great. Just don't ever wear it with black. Day before I present it, I wore black pants with it, which is fine, right? But I mean, I'm thinking, what? And then of course that as soon as they leave, I'm going on Google and I'm like, which color pants can you wear with a brown blazer? And I'm finding black. So I'm getting validated, off of people that I don't know. I'm not posting on social media. I'm just trying to find this to make sure I'm absolutely not crazy. Yeah. And doing this color combination that you never do ever, like this law that I broke and I subjected all of these people to. But that's amazing. So as you went through all of those, I'm immediately putting people to those. And I think by doing that process is an awareness process. And again, I'm going to, but I think it's safety. It's people being able to perceive and generalize out to their environment. And if you can't do that, I think that's a concern. I mean, if you're just plowing and so linear through life, and if you've just had your humor maybe dampened by a workplace, or just by people around you. I mean, one of the things, so I teach school administrators, and in some open conversations, I said, one of the parts of the job is I feel that if I smile or if I laugh, there's always someone who's saying he's not taking it or she's not taking it serious.
Taking it seriously. Oh, yeah.
And it's like, that's not at all what's happening. But if they can't bring you down to feeling the anxiety that they feel and that they can't deal with it, then somehow, you're dismissed or callous or something like that. So, but it's, I think the book is this pressure relief valve, this way for people to have a mirror to kind of see inside of themselves and laugh. Again, I go through so many of the comments just because people in the comments are funny, right? They're doing they're pulling their own stuff out. And and it's doctors and nurses and lawyers and college students and it's almost like you could curate this whole all these discussion threads and pull out something that in and of itself would be a companion document.
And something insightful. Like I think that it is always surprising to me, and it shouldn't be because these are designed this way, but I post something and then I have a whole bunch of people in the comments working out what they went through today. And it's like, right? Like I shouldn't be surprised about it. It happens all the time. But every time it's like this little note of oh, I feel like I helped them in some tiny way as a stranger on the internet. Yeah,
you did. I mean, it is a tool for doing that. So I've seen this with your book, and I want you to tell me about some of the unique experiences. When I posted when I became an author, I started to have people email me photos of the book and photos of the book, where they're in a canoe, and here's me out on a lake with the book. Here's me at whatever in Arizona with the book. And I'm like, well, I didn't even know that happened. So I talked to one of my friends that had published several books. He's like, oh, yeah. And he said, the more you do it, the more outrageous the photos become. Yes. So I want to ask you, what have been some of the most outrageous images where someone has said, here's Effin book, and here's the context.
So I'll tell you the very best. One of these, it was a couple days after Christmas, and it wasn't about the book. It was about a different product from the Effin Bird store. It was about a beach towel.
Okay.
I don't know if it was either Joe or Nick. One of them said, hey, we can make beach towels on demand. Should we make beach towels? And I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Who wants to buy a beach towel that says eat farts?
Right.
And so we did it anyways, because that's a great reason to do it. It's a dumb idea. And it costs nothing. They're on demand. So I might as well do it. It took me 20 minutes to put the art together. Done. And so there is a picture that I got sent of a person's mom opening her Christmas gift. And she's holding up the towel, and you can see that it says eat farts, and it has this big majestic eagle on it. And the look of disdain on mom's face, and how upset she is that she got this present, it warmed my heart.
Yes.
I loved it so much. Anyways, the greatest part of that, though, was it ended up with me having a conversation back and forth with the woman who gave it to her mom and who took the picture. It's Meredith Llanos, and she is a great musician. And ultimately, a serious project that I was working on, I needed a composer and violin player for it. And so because Meredith sent me this picture of her mom holding up the towel that says eat farts with this horrible look on her face, it led to us working on a project called No Second Chances, where she composed an original score for a podcast series I was working on where so in my serious work, I have done a series of podcasts for Canada 2020, which is a think tank in Canada. The crown jewel of what we did together is a program called No Second Chances, where we talk to the 12 women who've been First Minister in the history of Canada. There have only been 12 women. First Minister for non-Canadians, it's a provincial premier or the Prime Minister.
Okay.
We've had one woman as Prime Minister. We've had 11 women as provincial premiers or territorial premiers. So we talked to all 12 women and had them tell their stories in the first person. We went to them so that they were in control. They were in their homes. We literally ended up at the Arctic Ocean. I was in Nellie Cornier's little wooden house on the edge of the Arctic Ocean. She's 78 years old. She fishes off her back porch for sustenance. Incredible. And that's where we went to talk to her. She was the premier of the Northwest Territories. And anyways, to have them tell their own stories, because their stories all have very, very similar trajectories. And so it's a great exploration of women in politics in Canada and what it's like to get there, to get into politics, to rise, and then to ultimately to fall. And the reason it's called No Second Chances is in the history of our country, at the first minister level, no woman has been reelected. In the entire history of the country. And so it was even kind of put to the test during production of it. Rachel Notley was the premier of Alberta and was going through the Alberta election in which she lost. It was, anyways, very serious project. There are some jokes in it, but there's not a lot of jokes, and there's certainly no birds that say the F word in that project. But Meredith composed a magnificent solo violin score for it. And it was my great pleasure to spin a picture that says "Eat Farts" with Meredith's upset mom holding it into a heartbreaking and beautiful piece of music,
Wow, that's outstanding.
That's why the internet is great. The internet can be a horrible cesspool, but the internet can be a beautiful, wonderful place. And it's like, and I mean, when I say the internet, I mean social media, right? Because social media can be awful, but social media can lead to these connections. Social media can give us opportunities that we would never have another way. And it's so frustrating to have had this great experience on Twitter have to be lumped in with the horrible experiences of everybody every day on Twitter. So
thank you for tuning in to the Safety Doc Podcast with the nation's leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin, author, radio show host, university instructor, researcher, expert witness, and consultant. Powerful testimonials. Dr. Perrodin has a strong reputation as the go-to safety consultant, and he was still able to exceed our expectations. When we went looking for an expert in the field of crisis preparedness and prevention, David was the single person we pursued. Not easy stepping into the touchier subjects of life, but Dr. David pulls it off. Take a listen. Now, back to Dr. David Perrodin and the Safety Doc Podcast.
Yeah, I agree. In my profession, I've met some of my closest friends now, through social media, and even when I started the podcast, Hector Solis, who is an established podcaster in Texas, reached out to me and said, "Hey, I like your content, but I can tell your audio's messed up, and this is messed up, and this is messed up. Will you let me help you?" I mean, that's what he said. Will you let me help you? And I said, yes, absolutely. Because I'm recording, and some of the weirdest configurations as I'm just getting started. So Hector, helped me, made tutorials and said, here, I'm going to send them in a Google Drive to you, little video tutorials, do this, get this software, do this. And instantly, things got better. And we've remained friends. And again, you talk about, people, someone I could do as a member check. I was presenting on PBS in July. I did present at PBS, and before I did that, I did many mock presentations because that stuff you got to have down. Yeah. And I said, just give me some feedback. I'm not putting this out to everyone, right? But just give me some feedback on timing or whatever, and really helpful. So, but yeah, people, this network. Somebody asked me what would be different in your next book, because I'm working on a second book. But what's going to be different? And I said the difference is I've got to know so many people. And most of them are through social media, and good people, wonderful people. So yeah, there's crazy, wild stuff out there and the negativity, but there are also extremely creative, kind people, and I have no idea. And so I'm like, iron sharpens iron.
For the first, the first iteration of what the Effin Birds book was going to be was this crowdfunded book, and we're on the Unbound platform, which is a tremendous platform if you have an audience and you want to publish a book and you want a pathway to bookstores, but you don't know how to get there. And I'm in the middle of the Unbound campaign, and there is Unbound asked if they can connect me with a writer who also wants to put together an Unbound campaign, who turns out is someone that I am a huge fan of. And I was like, yes, please. so I'm working on, I'm doing the crowdfund for the original version of the Effin Birds book, and Unbound contact me and ask if they can put me in touch with this other writer who wants to do an Unbound campaign, answer some questions and help them out with it a little bit. And it's something that like I am a huge fan of. Like I had been that afternoon reading something else that they had read, that they had written, and I was so excited. And in the end, we had this great conversation where it was like, okay, let's figure out how to help each other. Let me help you with this campaign. And in one of the projects that I have potentially coming up is a comic book that I've wanted to write for a while. And so I have an Eisner Award-winning story editor for comics that has said, yes, send me, let's do feedback. And it's like, all I had to do was say, yes, I'm totally willing to help, you know? When you say yes to things, when you say yes to helping, like
right.
It comes back to you, and it comes back to you often bigger than you could offer in the first place.
Yeah. And so that's another good takeaway from this, because that's something I've been taught. And it's something I've been doing, more and more, because people who are just, starting in, writing books, children's books regarding safety and children's trauma and stuff like that. Hey, would you look at this? I know you're busy and busy. And it's like, someone did it for me. Like somebody did it for me. This is a good thing that you're doing. Yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this for
Absolutely.
you. And then it does roll back around, because then they're, letting people know of your work. So before this slips out of my head, I've been thinking, has anyone contacted you and said, I really was at a struggling point in my life when I got your book. And maybe it's something where, a family member has passed, some change in career, something like that. And they've really come out and said, this just reframed things for me. It's like this got me through a rough patch. Because I think your book could do that.
Messages. Yeah. I get a lot of, especially on social media, I get a lot of like, I was feeling like garbage, or this bad thing happened and I was feeling this way about it. And then this thing came along and has turned that around. And so I always feel good when I get those. I feel like my personal therapy has helped somebody else, because like these all come from things that bothered me. And so it is wonderful that the way that I'm dealing with what bothered me is there and helpful for somebody else.
How do you think Effin Birds will age in 10 years? How are people going to look back on this? Because, it's hit and miss, right? How things age. They can age great or horribly.
I would be happy if, so here's a great piece of perspective that I heard once on the commentary track for the movie Seven, David Fincher, who's early in his career at this point. He says, to a question somebody else asks about how he wants this movie to be regarded in the future, he says, I will be happy if this is a movie that somebody's switching channels late at night and it shows up on cable and they're like, oh, that movie, I remember that. I'm going to sit down and watch the rest of it, And I think that's kind of like, that's all you can ask for. You can't hope for, you can't hope for a book that gets printed 20 times, and has anniversary editions and all that kind of stuff. Because if you hope for those things, your expectations will get crushed. At some point, your expectation will always be higher than what you're going to achieve. And so I'm a big fan of, there was a book called The Meaning of Life that was by John Lloyd and Douglas Adams. That was a dictionary, a fake dictionary. And I loved The Meaning of Life, and I bought a copy of it, and I felt like none of my friends knew what it was, and I gave it to all of them for their birthdays and stuff like that. And then about 5 years later, a second version of it came out called The Deeper Meaning of Life.
Oh.
And that was it. Like, I don't think it's had any, I don't think there's any lasting cultural impact to that book, which is, it's from Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He has made a dent in the literary universe, and that's one of his books that I don't think is even in print right now. And so I would love to have that kind of impact, a book that somebody buys for a bunch of their friends because it made them laugh a lot, and, that sticks around on people's shelves. I'm I'm blessed in that there's a hardcover edition of this book, which is not a thing that I expected. You know, I was expecting we were going to do some, you know, paperback that I could afford to print. You know, I was going to do a print run of X number of books and they'd go out there. But instead, like, I have a hardcover book that's with 10 Speed Press. They're distributed by Penguin Random House. It's going to bookstores. Like, I can't ask for more than that. That's the dream right there. The weird little cult book on the shelf at the back of the humor section where they keep all the other weird little books. You know, if I'm on the bookshelf where the Meaning of Lift was sitting, that's everything I want in the whole world right there.
How about with political correctness and just it seems everything is getting measured. And again, this, people tell me this in the schools. I have to be very careful about, what I say, what I wear, what kind of vehicle. I mean, all of these things now have some deeper interpretation by the masses, right? And that's what people are tuning into. I mean, is your perception that this book will transcend that, or at some point it'll be kind of this soft censor which would be a shame, right? I'm saying that would be a tragic reflection of society of shutting something else.
But the thing is, I don't feel like the book is going to be in that place, because I like to do the exercise of, if somebody says political correctness, replace that with respecting how other people feel. Do you know what I mean? Because you can almost always substitute one for the other, and sometimes they make the arguments become very hilarious. But the thing about this book is, it is about respecting how other people feel. Like, it's directly addressing how people feel. It's directly addressing how I feel, and having empathy for that. And so I don't think that it's in any danger of going away in that way. Now, that said, one of the most fascinating things that happens on social media is that sometimes people will see an Effin Bird post or a Swear Trek post and say, wow, that's about this specific topic that I care a lot about, and it's right, and it's diametrically opposite to how I feel about it. And then they get very mad. And I embrace those conversations, because I say, this is like a Rorschach test. You see in it what you bring to it.
Absolutely.
And I feel like this argument that we are having, me and this person on the internet, is an argument you were having with somebody else that you've now brought to this. Because your feeling about it, I mean, intentionally, I leave them vague so that you can put your own circumstances on them. But you have read a lot into 6 words,
Yes.
And so it's been productive to have those conversations, because those are also people who are having a terrible day. They're having a terrible day. And I think it's better for me to be the focus of the anger laser, because I can get past it, better me than somebody who's not expecting it, or who hasn't dealt with it, or who will then flip their lid and have a huge blowout argument with this stranger on the internet. It's better to be able to say, hey, like, I totally get where you're coming from. That wasn't my intention when I wrote it, but also I wrote it open so that you could find your own intention in it. And I think you are connecting it with what else is happening in your life. And you're mad at not me, but that other thing that's happening. And almost always they say, yep. There's a couple of times when people have said, no, 100%, you meant this. And I was like, I mean, I'm the one who knows what I meant, and I wrote this because a guy cut me off in traffic. So, but like, I get it. I get why you feel that way, because I wrote it like that. And that is the trap that I kind of set for myself a little bit, is that they are open to interpretation, and sometimes those interpretations can be negative. But, I mean, I don't know. I feel good about the way I do it, and that's all you can ask for, is to do it in a way that you feel is positive and a contribution.
We talked about what's next, and I was inaccurate. I thought there was a book coming out with crustaceans, right? Crabs.
This is that one.
Clams,
this crab that I posted. That it's just it went to the Effin Birds feed, but it was a picture of crab, and it says, look, asshole, I don't have time to explain. And I mean, the joke is that it's a grab in the feed, that's why it's the joke. But I'm not going to do, I like to move on to something different. And I think one of my struggles is the expectation for me for the next thing is always something similar. The expectation when Swear Trek did well is that I was going to go find some other property and give it the Swear Trek treatment. And it's like, yeah, but I did that, and I did it well. And so let's find a different thing, Yeah. I mean, I'd do it if somebody wanted to, back it financially, for their own content library. Hit me up, big providers. But I want to do things that are at least a little bit different. And so, my next pile of things is I have taken this opportunity of having a book coming out of bookstores to say, what are the projects that I would like to do? What are dream projects? Put them on the pitch list, flesh them out enough that you can pitch them. And so if this book does well, because it comes out October 15th, if we see good sales and, my publisher is interested in another book or somebody else is interested in a book, I've got some pitches. And so that's all I can ask for. I used to, for a long time, I wrote about baseball. I revisited a very old pitch of mine that's now at the 15th anniversary of the event that I wanted to write about, because in 2004, the Toronto Blue Jays, I'm from Toronto, the 2004 Toronto Blue Jays were expected to be a great team, and then they were one of the worst teams in the history of the franchise. They lost 100 games. Whoa. And that I was covering the Jays during that, and it was just like everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And I think that it's a great time for an oral history of what went wrong in 2000. Because there are a lot of things. And as soon as I reached out to a couple of people about it, they were like, oh, did you know this story? And I was like, I did not know this story. Wow. And so I have this great, already collection of wonderful anecdotes. But there's that. I've also been working on a joke for a long time called Vin Diesel is Hamlet. Where you just take Hamlet out of Hamlet and you put actual Vin Diesel in his place, or the Vin Diesel that we all perceive as Vin Diesel, the Fast and Furious / XXX Vin Diesel, and it's sort of like in my mind mentally removing Hamlet, putting in Vin Diesel, and just letting him pinball around and see what happens and writing it down, which is so much fun. But I figured out a framework to do that as a comic book, and so that I have about 20% written. I'm very pleased with that. I had a project about pirates in which Daniel Defoe is the villain. He's the smarty pants writer who gives everybody a bad name. And I have what else have I got? I got a project called Tinseltown, which is about an idealistic 1950s Los Angeles police detective who gets transferred to the North Pole, and he uncovers a web of corruption at the North Pole where Santa Claus, the big guy, is at the center of it. So.
That's awesome. Get Tim Allen, right? That's wow.
Yeah, so I got a bunch of weird projects. I'm looking at my list of what else is there. The Pirate Project. Oh yeah, I have a project that's in my notes as the Cease and Desist Project. There are a lot of projects that I've done that I've been worried that somebody is going to object to them and say no and pull the plug. Yeah. This one, 100%. I'm going to get a Cease and Desist letter.
Okay.
I still kind of want to do it. And so I have connected with a bunch of friends, and that's a video project that looks like we're going to do at least a single episode. And so we'll see if we'll see how quickly I get a cease and desist letter for the Cease and Desist Project. I mean, I called it that in the notes, so obviously I'm putting that out there in the universe that that's what should happen. But it's also the right way to not have to do that project for a year. It's like, let's do 2 great episodes and get a cease and desist and be done. That's the greatest. It's like what they tried to do with the Beatles' Let It Be album movie, where they went up to perform on the rooftop, where their goal was to have the police break up the concert and that be the end of the film, right?
Oh,
and so
okay.
The police break up the concert because, there was a noise complaint.
Wow.
Who puts in a noise complaint against the Beatles? Who is that guy? That's a story that somebody should write.
Just absolutely, yeah. So it's just tuning into that humor, and thankfully I've had that throughout my life. Even when I presented on public television and we're talking about school safety, there's still people in the audience who are able to smile and reflect a little bit as I'm talking about how crazy it is that we think we have to do like bulletproof igloos and put superintendents in, and then people can bring their guns. and shoot at this igloo. And if the superintendent makes it out okay, then we buy 7 of them. I'm like, yeah, but there's a downside to that, right? If it doesn't make it out, then you have to get a new superintendent. And I'm just like, what the hell? Who thought this was a good idea?
Yeah.
And it's so crazy. And I'm respectful. I understand it, but at the same time, you have to point out to people just how over the top some of this is. Yeah. So as we bring to a close, your work with Fireside. Can you tell me about Fireside
Conference?
Yeah, what the Fireside Conference is, your role in it, who's there, what it accomplishes.
So I was invited to Fireside Conference for the first time 4 years ago, and I did not know what to expect. I had an unexpected social media success. I had gone viral for the first time in a sustainable way, and I went to give a talk on my unexpected journey, and I sort of understood what I was getting into from how they described it, but I didn't really understand until I got there. Fireside is at a kids' summer camp. It is the weekend. It's the first weekend after Labor Day, so kids are back to school, so the camp is empty. It's the last weekend where it's still kind of warm enough to go up there, but but no kids are going to be up there.
Yes, and
it is cabins with bunk beds, right? A mess hall, tennis courts, and sporting equipment and a swim dock and all that kind of, a summer camp, old school summer camp. And it's been around for 50 years. The camp that it's held at, it's at Camp Walden in it's 3 or 4 hours north of Toronto. And the thing about it, that setting makes it great, and it brings this aspect of play and camp to a technology conference. But more importantly, there is no cell service. And while they have a Wi-Fi connection in one building, it is satellite Wi-Fi, which is like dial-up, except worse because it has a huge delay on it. So there's no cell service, and there is Wi-Fi, but it's only in one place, and it's very bad. And so you know what? Electricity is limited there. There's almost no place to plug in. So you're giving talks, but you're giving talks around a fire pit. One year I literally sat in an Adirondack chair. Those kind of and I sat in an Adirondack chair and did a podcast. It was great, and you can hear crackling fire through the whole thing. But even there's an amphitheater that's in the round. The lake is behind it. There's the fire pit, and then you stand here, and there's a cute little amphitheater. And so it forces you to connect on a very human level because we have none of our other crutches to rely on. There's no heading off to see what happened on Twitter, because even if you go to the Wi-Fi place, it's terrible. So It's not going to be a good experience. And this year was the first year where I never connected to the Wi-Fi. I've gone 4 years in a row, and this year I did not even try to connect, and I felt very proud of myself. I also brought a giant banner that says "fuck Wi-Fi."
I saw that.
We hung in the Wi-Fi room. So I felt really good about that. So it is a conference where there's not only a huge personal connection aspect to it, but also it is very focused on what you can give to other people rather than what you can take away from the conference. So, and it plays into that whole idea that if you are giving things to other people, you're going to get back, and you're probably going to get back more. And that is a primary ethos of it. They keep it small. It's about 400 people. It's an absolute knockout of a conference if you can get in, because it's actually hard to get in. It is worth getting into because limited number of spots, because it's really about the capacity of the summer camp. It's about the capacity of the summer camp and about what's the capacity where everybody could probably meet everybody else.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so it's been fascinating. I've forged some ongoing friendships and ongoing business relationships there. And it's been tremendous for both of those. I love it. I've been 4 times, definitely going back next year. Next year, I'm trying to bring my the whole Effin Birds team with me. We won't have a private cabin because those cabins hold 20 people, but we'll at least have a corner of it that belongs to us. But I've seen there's a company that was there this year that they rented a whole cabin. They brought literally their whole team. It was so great.
So there's some center theme of comedy in it, or
no.
It's more connection. It's more
technology. Like it
okay,
is the primary people that are there are like there's venture capital people, there are startups, there are the last few years have had a real focus on the cannabis business, particularly in Canada because it has been legalized, but also, startups coming from the States and from, in places where it is legal or places where they're expecting it to become legal. There's a side conference that's about like innovation in law, which is, I think, fascinating. But hearing those guys talk, there's so much space for technology to refine what is a very paper-driven process, very paper-driven process. And so I love it because unexpected things happen there. I did not expect that I would make a great friend in Christina Crook, who wrote a book called The Joy of Missing Out, which was spawned by her taking 31 days off from the internet and from, that kind of technology in general. But it's about her book and her talks are about focus and understanding what's valuable, what is contributing to you and what is taking away from you, and you finding that balance that works for you. And I didn't need it as much the first year that I was there as I needed it the second and third and fourth year that I was there. She has a podcast that's the JOMO cast, the Joy of Missing Out podcast. She had me on to talk about work-life balance. And it's an ongoing struggle for me, but I'm happy to have her in my corner helping me out.
Wow. I mean, so what you're talking about is forging, those relationships, those member checks, and
yep.
I think the health of that conveys through your work because your work is so dialed in. And what you've shared today is helping people to understand, not everything, but many things that go into the back of that as far as taking care of yourself psychologically, relationships, priorities. I know some people I've talked to who I can see, kind of on the burnout path and even in their 40s.
I've been on that path. It's not a good path.
I envision your book when I'm reading through the comments and people are reading this is, it's helping them with agency, with purpose, with humor, with being aware of what's happening in life. And is this really so serious? Because, I might take things too seriously, I think is a point that comes out of that. And I think it's doing so much good for so many people that you'll never be able to measure, right? You'll never know how much it just changed their disposition. So when they did come home and they were with friends and family, that they weren't the buzzsaw that they were going to be. And
fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed that that's the impact.
Fingers crossed. So I love your book. I love your work. But let's tell people how they can get the book, how they can buy an Effin Birds deck of cards.
All the magical things can be found at effinbirds.com. That's where all the fun nonsense is. And the book itself can be found. It's coming out October 15th. So if you are seeing this before October 15th, anywhere that carries books from Penguin Random House can order it for you. You can have it on release day. So that's, all the major places. And then after that, hit up your local bookstore and ask them to keep it in stock for you. And if you want a list of what bookstores have it, if you go to effinbirds.com, scroll down till you see a picture of the book, you click on it, it'll take you to Penguin's website, and it'll have a little where to order button, and it'll tell you. Do you know IndieBound?
Yes.
It's not a thing up here in Canada, but I love it for the States because you put in a zip code and it says, here are 6 stores around you that can carry this book. And it's love it. Let's indie publishers, indie bookstores, let's do this,
Wow. I strongly encourage anyone listening to this, just go and check it out, and you're going to want the book. You're going to want the book because 200 pages, right? 200 pages.
About 200 pages.
And the the drawings are incredible. The whimsical script just brings out amplifies the humor. Amplifies the
typefaces. I love shopping for typefaces.
It's such a perfect match, and you're gonna people are gonna be like, what's happening? You're laughing. It's so funny. I mean, I would call it the calibration tool, right? Because after you do something, you're for a while, you got to sharpen a knife, you got to calibrate, machinery, whatever. And it's the same thing with us, all of us. We need to be calibrated. It's a calibration tool. So I love it. Thank you for your time today with the Safety Doc podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's Aaron, it's my honor, and I strongly, work to keep my show and work with people. So we have agency and purpose, and then also like physical environment, safety and procedures. And people kind of want to go off on physical environment procedures and say, there's this whole other part that we need to attend to. It's kind of the warmware, right? It's all of us versus software and hardware. And if you don't do that, these other systems are just bound to fail because people aren't going to know how to interact with them, or something stressful happens in life and they're going to crumble in that. So, this was fun for me, and this is something where people are going to take out of this and hopefully get right online. It was funny. Somebody was asking me, so where can I get your book? I'm like, places that sell books. I mean, it's not that hard and elusive to find. I mean, if you can't find it right away, if you go on the internet for 3 minutes and do a Google search, I mean, you're going to find it, right? Have a great day, and my continued, praise for the book and just my excitement. I really like to see when people take their talent and push it forward, and then it blossoms, and then everybody else benefits from it because it becomes a roadmap for other people. I'm happy for you. This is I just am. I mean, as I'm going through, I'm like, I'm just so glad this is happening, and nice. I just sense it's the start, and whatever else comes out, I'm going to be there. Probably won't do a beach towel. Deck of cards, absolutely.
Deck of cards is great. Yeah,
I'm going to be there. So, well, we have Aaron Reynolds today on the Safety Doc podcast. So check out Effin Birds. You can go to effinbirds.com. It's wonderful. It's hilarious. It's intelligent. It's brilliant. Please check it out. And just all of his work. Aaron Reynolds, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Safety Doc podcast.
Thanks for having me.
This has been the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio show host, and leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Remember to check back each week for the latest, best, and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. You can find Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.